Chris Luzniak,
And I'm Rob Byer,
and this is the DebateMath podcast.
the show where we redefine what it means to debate in mathematics and education.
Where multiple sides of ideas are explored, evidence matters, and we all grow and learn from hearing each other.
Because the world and our classrooms are not binary.
So let's dig into this month's debate.
Hi, listeners. As we kick off the back to school season, we wanted to spend some time exploring new ways to bring debate and argumentation into your math classroom.
Last year, with the help of Mike Flynn and Zach Champagne, we started a few discussion and debate routines to help get meaningful conversations started.
So this year, we're taking things a step further by highlighting how some brilliant educators are building deeper activities around mathematical argumentation and debate. So in today's episode, we're diving into a routine I just learned about called Math Wrangles.
Wait, what are Math Wrangles? How do they work? And how might teachers find them powerful for student thinking and discourse? Tune in as our guest walks us through the details in our mini lesson.
Here, joining us from South America to share one of her favorite activities is a math educator who has spent most of her career teaching, coaching, and consulting with math departments in international schools around the world. As the math enrichment coordinator at the American School of Brasilia, she engages students in math circle style activities where they explore and discover aspects of mathematics that are not typically part of the curriculum. She's part of the Math Circle community in the US and works with teachers around the world to bridge the gap between how math is taught in schools and how it is practiced by mathematicians. It's Tiffin Kalkani. Hi, Tiffin.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. And can you tell our listeners where you are and more about yourself?
So I live in Brasilia, Brazil, which is the capital of Brazil in the center of the country. I'm in the tropics. It is warm here all the time. Coming from the northeast of the US, it was an adjustment for sure. And I am, as my role as the math enrichment coordinator, I work with kids in grades 3 through 8 mostly, but full school, helping teachers and students understand mathematics slightly differently than they're used to. So we do a lot with math problem solving. We do a lot with looking at math different than just a set of skills that they need to learn to pass or take a test or get the right answer. Yeah, because I have kids coming from backgrounds from all over the world. They have very different math education backgrounds, and it's really hard for a classroom teacher to teach the range of them in their classroom. So I tend to pull kids out who are at either end of the spectrum to work with them in smaller groups in order to give everyone the math education that's at their level, at their ability, and challenges everybody, but also makes everyone feel welcome in the community that they're in.
And the question we ask everybody that comes on the podcast, when did math first become controversial to you?
So it's interesting. When I was um, living in Tunisia, I took it ends up being a long story, but I ended up taking a class in Madrid. So I had started teaching math when I lived in Kazakhstan 2 years before that, and then moved to Tunisia and continued teaching math. My background is as a science teacher, and so math was new to me. And I hadn't been through education to be a math teacher. And so I taught math in Kazakhstan the way that I was taught, which was very procedural and rote. And then when I moved to Tunisia, I went to a training in Spain actually a couple times a year for a few years. And we relearned all of mathematics from the ground up. We basically started in pre-K kindergarten and relearned conceptually all math through middle school and then eventually through high school conceptually. And that was revolutionary to me because before that, I didn't think that I was someone who could ever invent math. And I didn't think I could teach kids that they could be part of math, that I thought that they were consumers of it. So they had to kind of follow the program, follow the examples. Here's the procedure, here's how you get the answer. And then once I understood math conceptually, it opened up this world of math to me. I could explore it how I wanted to. It wasn't just following a procedure. And so that's where really changed. My whole perspective changed. And I was so excited to share that with students and with uh, other people. And just that math is figure outable. We can all discover it. Like, we can all figure it out. We can all play around with these aspects of it. And I love sharing that with kids and with teachers and everybody, really.
Yeah, thank you. Shout out Pam Harris.
Yeah. And with that, let's get into this discussion.
We will begin this mini lesson by giving Tiffin a chance to share what Math Wrangles actually is. What are they? Why are they useful? Tiffin, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, I'll start with a story. So, as I mentioned earlier, I teach at an international school in Brasilia, Brazil. And last year, in the middle of the year, a new student arrived. And her first week, we weren't going to have her participate, but she observed a math wrangle. And she went back to her math teacher and she said, I've never looked at math this way before. And she was referring to math not as a process of getting the answer, but as a way of exploring the concepts and making connections. So, what math wrangles are they're a type of mathematical debate. So, two teams get the same problem set ahead of time and they work through the problems in small groups. And they come up with a solution and prepare an argument for presenting their solution. Then the two teams face off in a wrangle. One team presents their solution to a chosen problem. They don't just present the answer, but they present the reasoning behind it. And then the opposing team is listening closely because they're going to need to rebut. And a rebuttal is not just presenting their answer, but rather responding to the original presentation. And they're responding by pointing out gaps in the logic, mistakes that they've made, or explaining a more elegant approach. And while the right answer is part of what makes the team successful, it's just the starting point. The elegance, clarity, and the quality of the communication of the solution are what are valued most. Math wrangles are one of the best ways I found to get reluctant students talking about mathematics. They develop their communication, teamwork, and problem solving skills, and they bring beauty and elegance of math to the classroom. And these are not aspects that are normally part of classroom mathematics. Because math at its heart is elegant and beautiful, and math wrangles give students the opportunity to explore them. They also focus on the conceptual understanding, the problem solving, and the mathematical communication parts of a math class, which are parts that are often kids don't see those aspects as important as just getting to the answer. And since I've added math wrangles to my classroom, I've noticed that my students' confidence, as well as their mathematical thinking and communication skills, have really grown. And these are the things that I want my students to get out of the math class. And I think math wrangles are a really strong way to get them there.
Well, that's so cool. And I love you said the elegance and beauty of mathematics. I love this. I want this more for all students, right? Let me back you up for a second in our questions here. I want to first know, like, where'd you hear about them or how'd you come up with these ideas? Kind of where'd it come from and how'd you start kind of doing them?
So, math wrangles, as far as I know, they came to the US from Russia. Uh, and they came along with the Math Circle community. I'm really active in the Math Circle community in the United States. I worked for Global Math Circle as their education director for a few years, and I now work for Orlando Math Circle in their Math Circle aspect. So, in this Math Circle community, Math Wrangles was just one aspect of it. And so, Math Circles, if you don't know, are mathematical, it's a way to teach math that really bridges the gap between the way math is practiced by mathematicians and the way it's taught. So kids are learning what mathematicians do and learning math through exploration instead of through lecture and tests. And there's quite a few homeschooling communities who have really taken on math circles, and that's how they teach their kids math. They explore it, and in these communities, they explore mathematics. They have fun. They learn things, but there's no kind of celebration of the math they've learned, and it's not high stakes. It's actually very low stakes. You explore, you have fun, you move on. And so Math Wrangles were a way for them to kind of up a little bit of pressure, not a huge amount, to their kids who are participating. So I know they came from Russia as part of the Math Circle community, Math Circles came from Russia and Eastern Europe to the US. And then yeah, they were embraced by Math Circle communities. And so I came upon them because of just being active in the Math Circle communities around the US. I consulted for the Santa Fe public schools, and they use Math Wrangles. Every year they have a big math celebration where kids from all their elementary and middle schools come and they face off in Math Wrangles against each other. So it's a really it's a really beautiful way to celebrate mathematics. It also gives it a public face
Uh-huh.
in a school where math is often done in a closed door classroom, thought of more as an individual thing and not a performance thing. It brings that aspect of it front and center.
Okay. And I want to ask you a little bit more about details then of how it kind of works. So you said like there's two teams, they get a problem set. Um,
Mhm.
are they the same problem set? And can you give us like some examples of what the problems might look like?
Yeah, so the teams get the same problem set. They usually I create a problem set with the number of problems is either the same as the number of students on each team, or it's one or two more problems than the number of students on each team. And that gives every student the opportunity to either share or rebut to a problem. And so I usually take the problems from math competition problems that my students also participate in those aspects, or take them out of slightly higher, math enrichment or challenge problems that hopefully they haven't seen before. And so each team gets this problem set, and they're given the problem set in usually 60 to 90 minutes of preparation time. So they can sit with it and they can divide the problems up, work on them one at a time, work on them in pairs or groups. Once they've finished one problem, they can move on to another. So they can really decide as their team how they want to focus on the problems, how they want to split them up. And yeah, then they choose who's presenting which problem usually ahead of time, so that they've practiced the presentation if they have time, or um, they've thought about how they could rebut. And then when they face off, there's a coin flip, and the coin flip determines whoever wins the coin flip has a choice. They can either challenge the other team to present a problem of their choice. So if there's 6 problems in the set, they can say, "We want you to present problem 3," or they can choose to receive a problem and be the first team to present. Um, but then they don't get to choose which problem they're receiving, which problem they're presenting first. The other team gets to choose. And then it alternates back and forth. One team presents, the other team rebuts, and then they switch. But the opposing team always gets to choose the next problem that the presenting team presents.
And so is it like one class, like 1 hour, you said like they work on it as a team and like the next day is
Mhm.
the math wrangle where they share out, or does it happen like days later? Like how
Yeah, I mean, I work in a school where time is limited, so we do it. I usually have 1 hour long period where they can prepare, and then the next week I have an hour long period where they can present. But ideally, you would have them back to back, and then there's no kind of extra time that one team can have to think about the problem or prepare a little extra.
Yes, this is like super interesting to me. I'm curious, uh, like what does a problem look like? Like what do you have one that you like, even if our listeners just note where this is in your time and then hop over to the YouTube video and look. So that way you get to
Yeah.
wrestle with this problem as well. Could you show us one?
Sure, I could do that. So this is a problem I took from the Math Olympiad. It was from a 2023 Math Olympiad for elementary and middle school, the MOEM set. And it says, find the value of A and B when A squared minus B squared is 4,045 and B equals A minus 1.
And so when the students get this, what happens first? Like they go off and they start wrestling with this problem, and what does that look like? How many are in a group? How many
Yeah. Well,
what kind of
that's
things do you listen for? Like are there roles in the groups? Like how does that work?
so usually a group could has a team leader, and the team leader works to help figure out how they want to split up the problem. So maybe two or three students would start with this, or maybe even just one start with working on this problem. What I have for you is two solutions to the problem that were presented at a math wrangle that I did. Can I share the
Yeah.
solutions with you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so
Hold
so
on. For those of you listening,
yeah,
hit pause
before
if you don't want to hear it, and then you can come back to it. But go ahead.
good call. So the first one, the first student who presented this problem presented normal, the difference of two squares. So they factored it and found a minus b multiplied by a plus b is 4,045. And then they substituted, since they found out since they know it was given that b was equal to a minus 1, they substituted a minus 1 for their b into their equation. So they ended up with, when they factored it and simplified it, they ended up with 1 times 2a minus 1 equals 4,045. So 2a is 4,046 and a was 2,023. So if b equals a minus 1, then it was 2,022. And then they squared, to check it, they squared both a and b and found their answers, and then subtracted them and realized that, in fact, yes, it was 4,045. So they had the answer of a was 2023 and b was 2022. And so that was the presentation. It was very straightforward. So the second team, the rebutting team, I really liked this answer. They had the same question, but they didn't think to factor it, or they thought factoring it was too clunky. So they went for the elegant. So they looked for a pattern, and they found that 1 squared minus 0 squared was 1, 2 squared minus 1 squared was 3, 3 squared minus 2 squared is 5, 4 squared minus 3 squared is 7, 5 squared minus 4 squared is 9, and they noticed a pattern. And they looked for the pattern, and they noticed that if you had a squared minus b squared, it's going to be the same as a plus b. So then they said, okay, if 4,045 is a plus b, then you divide it by 2, you get 2,022 and a half. Therefore, a is 2,022 and b is 2,023. So thinking about the elegance of an answer and arguing for that, this solution being different and simpler would get more credit for being more elegant. And that's something that we don't usually talk about when we talk about math with students. So it's one of those things that's really interesting, and to see how they respond to it.
So as the students, the two groups of students, or however many groups of students are wrestling with this problem, what does the productive struggle look like in this environment? What role does the teacher play with that? How's questioning taken into play? How's feedback taken into play? I'm trying to paint the full picture here.
Yeah, so Math Wrangles as a one-off are not all that effective. What's effective is doing them over and over and over, and letting kids get better and better at them. And that's where you see more improvement in their thinking and reasoning and understanding of excellence. So when they're first tackling the problems, they're just solving them. And the first time they do that, they solve the problem, they get an answer, they're kind of done. And the first time I watch them present, I also videotape every single kid presenting separately. And then I send the videotape to them. I make them watch it and fill out a reflection form about what they did well, what they liked about what they did, what they could have done better, how they're going to improve for next time, how are they going to prepare this to improve for next time. And that's where you see the improvement on those next ones. So they prepare their questions. They usually, as much as I tell them to think about what the other team might argue and how you could respond to that, they don't always do that. They just prepare an answer. But during the wrangle, they are really active, especially after the first one. The other team is listening, they're writing down notes from what the first team said, they're talking to each other quietly because they're trying to be respectful. And they're really engaged. I usually give a 2-minute time limit for the time between the debate and the rebuttal, and they always want more because they're discussing it. They're preparing the person who's rebutting with everything that with the things they can say to make the argument more elegant or to find any kind of holes in the logic. Yeah, so during the debate is when that's really going on, and then the reflection between debates, between math wrangles, they get really excited about doing it again because they want to show that they can do it better. So the first time they do it, every single kid is, you see their back. They are presenting to their poster. Uh, and they realize that and how it doesn't look good on camera. So the next one, they're turned around and they're facing front. And and so they're looking at it. Or if they're mumbling, they're like, I couldn't hear myself on there. I'm like, yeah, we couldn't hear you either, darling. You gotta speak up. So they can see that. They can see how they look and how it's affecting them. And yes, they're super embarrassed to watch it, but I let them watch it with headphones on and nobody else sees the video. Um, so just them and me, and it's not graded, it's not evaluated, it's just feedback for them to do better the next time. And it's really effective.
And then now thinking about the groups of students, how do we or how do you make Math Wrangles accessible for students that may not see themselves as a math kid, especially like in middle school by the time they've made up their mind, or for the students who are just genuinely shy and very reserved, like an introvert? Like how can we make Math Wrangles more accessible for those kids, or maybe you've seen that and oh, you've probably seen that, and how do they flourish in this?
Yeah, it's interesting because the kids who are less confident in their mathematics skills often take on leadership roles in their math wrangle team. They're often the ones who are delegating, okay, well, we have two people who want to do this problem and no one who wants to work on this problem. Why don't you two work on the one together that you like, but then you're both going to have to work on the other one too. You see them really delegating and really taking on that role. Also, kids who are less confident in their math, they they tend to have more experience explaining their answer or thinking about the process of the answer. So they're more successful often in a wrangle than those kids who math came easy for them, because the kids that math came easy for them, they don't have experience thinking about how they got their answer. They have actually less experience talking about it. So they tend to not wrangle as well. They tend to not make their arguments as clear as those students who have always had to think about it, how always have had to stop and work their way through it. So it's interesting that I find it really interesting that it's not the kids who are the top in the math class who tend to do this as necessarily do this really well. And so I have a colleague in the math circle community who also teaches pre-service math teachers. And they are elementary school teachers, and she teaches a pre-service math course. And a lot of them have a lot of fear of the mathematics aspect of their upcoming job as a teacher. And she does math wrangles with them. And she finds that they are much more likely to engage in mathematical discussions in a math wrangle format. So they're much more likely to point out flaws in other people's logic or thinking because it's a game. So she says things like run on sentences that they've written down, they are quite happy to point it out, but in a class they're not. So it's really good for pre-service teachers as well, and other groups, not just students.
And so, what role does like collaboration versus competition play? Because I know that some will like I'm a very competitive person, so this is like right up my alley. But Chris is not as competitive. He's more about the collaboration. So how do we put that, that down the middle where it's a perfect balance of competition and collaboration?
Yeah, so they'll find out pretty quick that if they're competitive and solo, they're not going to do as well, because it's that collaboration before the rebuttal where they earn the most points, where that competition piece comes. If they're not willing to share their insights with others or not willing to help somebody else in the way that that person needs to be helped to present the argument, then their team isn't going to be as successful. So if they have that competition piece, they have to understand that that collaboration is really necessary in order to be successful in the competition. And if they're part of that collaboration, if they have that, I'm with Chris on this one. I would much rather collaborate than compete. But if they have that, then it's a great collaboration tool, right? You have these, you're all working together to try to make these presentations that you're doing as strong as possible.
And then so at the back end of this, once it's all said and done, and I know this is something that as if we were sharing this with teachers or teachers who are listening, they're going to ask the question that none of us really care for, but we have to ask it. What's grading look like? Like, how do we
Mm.
grade this? How do we score this? What does that look like? And like, is it more traditional or like just explain that part of it?
Yeah, so I have never graded a math wrangle. I've never evaluated one. I've created some rubrics now and then to see how they would go, and they've never quite worked. The judging by usually it's me and a couple high school students when I have middle school math wrangles. So I have high school students judging, and so if you win a math wrangle, I don't think that's necessarily indicative of your ability to do math or even your ability to present a wonderful math problem or your communication skills. It's just what you were like in that moment under the pressure of that time. So, um, if I were a teacher that had to, and I'm not luckily, that had to grade students or evaluate them on this type of activity, I think I would go for a self-evaluation and I'd look for improvement. So have them reflect on it and maybe evaluate how they grew from one wrangle to the next. Maybe if you have to evaluate the math, maybe the poster that they create beforehand and their how they answered the question. I know IB has a lot of the IB program, the middle years program in a school that my school is moving towards that. They have communication and problem solving as two of the aspects. And so those are two aspects that you could look at. But I think I would try to grade in collaboration with the child, with the student, instead of making it a judgment call, because those judgments can really inhibit the creativity that you have. For example, the problem that I showed earlier with factoring the quadratic, if I had been grading, I wonder if the students who created that really elegant pattern answer would even try that, because that's not something that they've learned. And they were kind of going out on a limb and saying, this one is more elegant than that one because look at how clever it is. Look at how short it is. And but they had never learned that. And they don't know these things. They don't know what elegance is. It's not something we normally talk about. They don't know what a beautiful answer looks like in math. So if you're going to evaluate them, that type of thinking will be inhibited.
So I'm loving this. The beauty, the creativity, also the public speaking skills you're teaching them, right? As they watch
Mm.
themselves, like all those skills. And I could see this happening both like you do in class, but it could be like an after school, like a math club could do this or something, right? Like
Mhm.
math team. Could see so many uses. So if I'm a teacher and I'm sold on this and I'm ready to try it, like in the fall coming up here in the school year, uh, what are your advice? Like, what are my first steps? What do I have to have ready? What do I need to do to prepare myself as a teacher and prepare the students? Like, what are some things to make the first one go relatively smoothly?
Yeah, so I have created a kind of a playlist or a list of what happens in it, the rules of a math wrangle, and you're welcome to share that. So you can look at that. But really, what you need is two groups of students. I would say start with a fewer number of students rather than more, so 4 to 8 students. Because the more students you have, the more problems you have, the longer it goes. And if it's not going well, or if the first one never goes great, it's really painful to sit through for, you know, 2 or 3 hours. So you want to keep it under an hour for the presentation and an hour for the preparation of it. So, I would say just two teams of kids who are willing to try it out for the first time and a problem set. So the problem set goes to both teams and give them an hour to prepare, explain the rules, have a stopwatch or a timer, and then one of the things that I found my first one, I asked the judges who were my high school students, to solve the problems on their own, and they didn't. So they didn't know the answers beforehand. So have a solution key, not just the answer, but a couple ways to get to the answer if you're going to use students as judges. I thought, and also a couple of them came and said, I don't know how to do this problem. So, okay, I hadn't thought about that as a problem. So if you're going to use adults as judges, have them go through the answers, the solutions in a couple different ways as well. It's also, schools are not necessarily set up for looking at these aspects, kind of the poetic aspects of elegance of an answer, or if you're using proofs, which I would suggest doing later on, but if you're having them argue, prove that instead of solve, then those questions are take a little bit more finesse, and you want to make sure that the people who are judging really understand what an elegant proof looks like, or what it means to prove something. Just giving 4 or 5 pieces of evidence that it works isn't actually a proof. So what does a proof look like? And that was a problem I came up with when I had them debating about prove. All the questions were prove that. And the high school judges that I had hadn't actually done as much work with that as my students had.
Yeah, I was going to ask any mishap stories that you can share, like to give us some ideas for troubleshooting. What maybe hasn't worked that you've tried and that people should keep in mind to avoid or work around?
I think students, I don't allow technology when they're presenting. I make them present on paper with, paper with marker, a poster board with marker, or a whiteboard or chalkboard. And the reason is because they tend to rely too heavily on the technology if I give it to them. So if they're using Desmos, for example, to graph something, they'll just be, as my Desmos graph shows, there's a correlation. And then there's no real argumentation. They think that the technology does the speaking for them. So you get weaker arguments. Also, if you Google something right now, it will give you the answer front and center. So if they're looking for help, even if they're not trying to get an answer, they're going to get one, and they might see that their logic is wrong or something like that. And so I don't allow them to use technology at all. And so I focus on questions where they don't need to use technology to present. Now, I'm not saying it won't work. I just think it adds another dimension that you have to look out for that might not be easy to regulate or just have in the mix. So they get paper and pencil, and that's basically it. I also don't provide them even with a calculator. They don't have to show their calculations, step by step, how they got the division, just that the division worked, but they have to do it on their own. Those are personal. I know other teams that allow those things, other groups that do Math Wrangles that allow those things, but it's not, I want them to focus on specific skills and not how to use technology. So another problem that I've noticed with kids is they see a presentation, they think it's perfect, and they don't even want to try to rebut. So they just say, I'm not rebutting, and they lose the points. They realize that. And some of them don't get caught up in the competition aspect, so that doesn't matter to them, but they don't want to. And I really want them to try, even if they don't do it well. So I don't know. It's strategic, right? If they're going to focus their efforts on a different question, I understand that, but I really want them to try, and so that sometimes they just don't.
My last question then is the other side of this. What are the positives? Where have you seen students come out of their shell or shine or surprise you in some ways? Can you just share maybe a quick story or anecdote about that?
I invited parents to come and see me. We did 5 Math Wrangles in the course of a year, and I invited parents to come see the third one, which was the last one of the first semester of school. And then I invited them to come see the last one at the end of the school year. And one of my parents was saying this was the most her son loved mathematics. He was always doing math. He was in my room at lunch. He emailed me weekly, if not daily, about new math things he learned on the internet. It was his favorite thing. And his first presentation, you could not hear him. You could not, he was even standing facing his poster so you couldn't even see what he was doing. And I recorded him and took it back and gave it to him. And by the last one, and his parents had come to that one and they'd come to the last one of the year. And they said they never thought their son would be a public speaker, but now they think he could actually share his information with people. And also, I don't teach classroom math classes, but teachers have told me that the kids who, after the Wrangles, their written communication skills on their assessments have also gone up. So it has aspects other than just in that situation.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you for sharing all of this. I could go on forever asking questions, but I want to wrap up things here. And we just want to conclude by giving you a chance to share any final thoughts you have with our audience or any last things that we didn't ask about. The floor is yours.
One of my colleagues, when I was telling him I was going to be here today, he mentioned that it's the start of a culture shift about math education in schools. And I know that schools have been the shift, there has been a culture shift in math education in the past 20 years from the mathematics that our parents used on a daily basis to math that is more relevant for today. But he really feels that this is the jumping off point. This is something that all teachers can use in their classrooms to show that those aspects that are harder to shift, the mentality that's harder to shift from the right answer being the goal of a math class to the process of getting it being really what's important. And he thinks that the Math Wrangles he's noticed in his classes that they've really helped with that difference in how we think about math in school.
All right, thank you. And that concludes this discussion.
Thank you
And
both so much.
Yeah.
thank you. And now it's up to our listeners to take a moment and ponder these ideas. And please share with your friends, have discussions, maybe reach out and try to figure out how you can do Math Wrangles in your own classroom. Also, be sure to follow us on Blue Sky at Debate Math Pod. Share your thoughts on this whole conversation today.
And again, thanks to our guest, Tiffin. I think this is a great activity to do with students. I love the idea of culture shift, and you had so much to share. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, thanks to all those who are listening, and we enjoyed and learned so much from this today.
So as we wrap up, Tiffin, where can listeners find you, learn more about you or Math Wrangles?
I'm not all that reachable online, but they could email me at tiffin@orlandomathcircle.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list, learn more about debate math, and connect with resources you could use in your classroom today. That's luzniak.com/podcast.
Feel free to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com, or follow us on social media at DebateMath or at DebateMathPod on Twitter.
And don't forget that you can text us with your thoughts on any of the debates too.
You can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us. Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you next episode. Until next time, cheers.